Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm David Yakir, and you're listening to Yak About Today, where you never know where the show will go. So get up, put your headphones on, go for a run, but listen to what we yak about today. Hey, everybody, thanks for listening. I am David Yakir. And a little housekeeping before we get into our guest, Dennis Littley, the famous chef that everybody apparently knows, at least the million people who follow him know. Anyway, a little housekeeping here. For those of you who've been listening to the Yak About Today in film, that will continue, and we will broadcast live to Facebook every Thursday. And for those of you who remember Yak About Today in its original form, we are back. And I'm really happy to have, as my first guest, Dennis Littley. And Dennis, famous chef. At least every time you research you could look at you and say, God, I want his followers. I want how he reaches people. Let's start from the beginning, okay? Chefing.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I started chefing back in 1984, I guess, professionally. Up to that point, before, I'd just been doing a multitude of other things, food service industry work. But my calling, I think I was just waiting for that opportunity where I had to get into a restaurant and see what I could do. And I trained the old way as an apprentice and learned my craft over a course of a few years, although I got thrown into the fire after a couple months of actually running the kitchen, cooking, not running it, but cooking all the food that was going out because I paid attention a lot. And, I don't say it. I try to say it as humbly as I can, but I was given a gift, and that gift was creating delicious food.
So you didn't have to go through all the chef schools and the culinary institutes and all that?
No, I wish I had, but no. At the time, I had some training in hospitality. I had an associate's in food science. I had learned, I actually worked at a nursing home 4 years as food service director with a very talented retired person who taught me a multitude. And I had some training from an old family friend early on in my late adolescence, and learned how to. She always said, you have to listen to food. You have to listen to food, and it'll tell you what it needs. And that was probably the most practical bit of training that I got, or getting out some of my gift to that extent. No, I started cooking in the 80s, and man, it's just been one wild ride since then. A lot of it in turmoil, and chefs don't lead the best lives. And I was down that road quite often, and the only thing that kept me afloat was my ability and what I could do in the kitchen.
Do you know what you can do? I've always been curious about this. So when people go to culinary school, or in your case, you work hands-on at a place, you follow recipes, or you follow other people's, recipes, or how they prepare things and how they do things and all that. I've always been interested in the transition from sort of cooking. You open the book and it says a quarter cup of this, a quarter cup of that, and time it, to 8 minutes, that type of thing. And then one day, what happens when all of a sudden you go, I have an idea. I can do something. I can recreate this or recreate it my own way. Tell me where that transition takes place.
Well, I think for the home cook, the transition takes place when they have made enough dishes with the cookbook that they are confident enough in their ability to just start to kind of, you don't want to say wing it, but basically that's what it is. And, part of what I teach in my blog is I have recipes, and I always tell people they weren't etched in stone. They didn't come down from the mountain, and the biggest problem people have when they're following cookbook recipes is they feel they have to stick to them 100%. You really don't. In baking, it's a little more critical because there's chemistry involved, but in just cooking your entrees, your side dishes, your vegetables, in making salads, anything that you make that you're going to consume that doesn't require chemistry should be predicated on what you like, and what makes you happy.
And how do you know that? So I'm cooking from a recipe, and I'm not a cook, but I've always been told if I'm following a recipe, two things matter: measurement and time. You get the measurement right, you get the time right, it should all work. But there are some things I like spicier or something.
Sure.
But all of a sudden I'm throwing an extra spice in and it just comes out bad. I don't know how to make that transition off the page.
Well, it depends on how much you're putting in, because it shouldn't, just adding a little extra seasoning shouldn't, unless you put too much of the extra seasoning in. So I think sometimes we should err on the side of less, because, you can always add more. It's hard to take salt out of something once you've already put too much in. There are some tricks to get it reduced, but you should always start and then add in increments when you add something. And it's a matter of what kind of spice you're using that crank up that. Like if you like a lot of heat, adding cayenne may not be the best bet because it's going to impact it very quickly. Adding hot sauce, again, a couple of drops at a time. Adding sriracha, is a little more forgiving because it's got other stuff in it. But, it's a matter of putting it in, tasting, putting it in, tasting, putting it in, tasting. If it tastes bad, a lot of times, I had somebody tell me one time, if your meal just doesn't have any zing or something, if it feels a little flat, put a little lemon juice in it. Sometimes a little acid like lemon juice or just citrus will pop the dish up. I always tell people to look for chicken base. And in the grocery stores, I buy Miners, and I get that on Amazon. But Miners was a restaurant standard. But in the grocery stores, you see this product called Better Than Bouillon. And I don't work for them. I don't get anything from them. But it's the closest product to Miners. And I don't work for Miners either. But it's the closest product that really adds some zing. And I tell chicken base, even in seafood dishes, chicken base adds that pop to it. It gives you that little extra. And it's basically, we used to call it yellow salt, in the old days. But it adds that little extra flavor boost too. But, when I say to have some fun with a recipe, I'm talking about maybe, like if you're making a chicken dish and it's got broccoli in it and you don't like broccoli, well, maybe you like spinach. Put spinach, or maybe you like zucchini. Put zucchini in. Work around those kind of things to kind of adapt the dish a little bit. And adding a little, like I said, adding a little heat shouldn't be that bad. Or maybe you add it on at the plate and you can adjust it a little bit better that way. So there's just little tips and tricks, things to do to enrich a dish.
All right. So, earlier I told you about our audience in Vero-Beach, and we have a radio station that covers the entire area. Our area is a very senior area, meaning basically it's a 55 plus area, although it's getting younger apparently, as Ellie will attest to, who's listening on here, that the area is getting younger. I have a question. One of the conversations that are always coming up, they come up in restaurants, they come up in our discussion of if you walk a dog in the neighborhood here, you get to meet all your neighbors and talk to all your neighbors. Many people here can't have salt, they can't have sugars, they can't, and everybody complains about the lack of taste because, if I'm correct, and you'll tell me if I'm correct or not, it's salt and sugar. That salt brings out all the flavors, apparently. I may be wrong. And sugar is, sugar type of thing. How do you get your head around making meals that are flavorful and delicious when you can't have certain ingredients?
Well, they're both flavor enhancers, so you did get that right. Salt and sugar, we have abused them so much, and that's why you can't have salt and sugar anymore, is because they're in so many things that we eat. I don't salt things a lot. I use pepper more, and my wife always says, "Oh, you put pepper on everything." I says, "Yes, because you notice I don't put salt on anything." So, I tend to juice it up with that. Again, as I mentioned earlier, a little bit of citrus, squeeze some lemon onto it if you want. It's not so much as the salt that's missing. It's that little, I don't know if it's the umami flavoring, but it's that little bit of extra bite you're getting from it. there's some other seasonings. Like I know people always use Mrs. Dash to kind of pick things up.
I remember that.
Yeah, natural flavors sometimes. Maybe you want to caramelize some onions to get a little more flavor. Natural sweetness, brings out a little sweetness to it. Making tomato sauce, I put a little sugar in it, but I don't put much. But if I didn't want to put sugar, carrots add sweetness. Beets add sweetness. There's certain things you can add to dishes that, if you chop them up fine enough, they'll add a little more sweetness to things that you have without increasing your sugar intake. It's hard, especially as you get older. And I have found myself in the same thing. I was diagnosed pre-diabetes, and I quickly got off everything related to sugar and flour. So I said, I do not want to be here with all the other problems I have. So I rectified that. But, it's not always as easy finding items that can help you do that. But I say watch your processed foods.
Right.
If you watch your intake of processed foods, because when we travel in Europe, we eat like fools. And we don't have any other problems because they don't use all the processed foods. So if you can cut back on processed foods, like as much as I love lunch meats, they're like the death knell anymore with everything that's in them. Things that we buy at the grocery store. If anything is pre-made, it's packed with preservatives. So this is where, it says, oh, Dennis, I don't like to make stuff. I don't have time. I understand. You got to try and simplify your life a little bit more than, whenever I make something, I make it, there's just two of us here. I make it in batches, and I freeze it. Okay, if you're used to cooking for a family of 8, keep cooking for a family of 8. Just pack it in 4 packs, and then you have dinners another night, and you control more of what's going into your body. So if you do that, those days you want to add a little sugar, add a little salt, it's not going to affect you as much.
So here's the question. You know the answer, and I'm sure everybody listening wants to know this. So you say the way you cook and your recipes are different from everybody else's. Tell me.
Well, I don't necessarily say they're different. You can't reinvent the wheel. It may be a different process or an easier process, or it just might be how I was taught to do it. There's 1,000 ways to make chicken parm out there. Okay. Is my way better? I like to think so, because it's not so much the cooking process, it's how I finish it. Okay, it's how, I gauge Italian restaurants. If they can't make a chicken parm, I don't trust them to make anything else. There's never enough sauce on it. There's never enough cheese on it. They give you this humongous piece of chicken with a little dollop of sauce, and it's like as dry as hell. So, fix it, make it right, make it palatable. I like to try and show you not shortcuts, but chef ways, because in a restaurant, we don't have a lot of time to cook. You're sitting down, you want your meal in 20 minutes pretty much. So if I can't have a way to make these things, a lot of my stuff is sauteed or quickly cooked, or it's something you can prep ahead of time. So my recipes are different in the terms of where you should be able to get dinner on your table in under 30 minutes.
It's funny, because I was going to ask you a question like that. When the time that we in my household cook for any length of time, it's when we have guests. And that's when you sort of start in the afternoon, or you start the day before and you prepare a couple of dishes and all that. But on a regular basis, night after night, you don't want to be spending an hour in the kitchen. So what do you think about all the sort of order meals where you get all the ingredients and it says in 20 minutes you can whip this up? What do you think of those?
Well, there's a lot of great meal companies out there, and I have tried a few of them. People have sent me stuff to sample and to see how it works. And I think a lot of them are really good. They're going to end up costing you more in the initial outlay, but they're going to save you money in the fact that you don't have to go shopping. You don't have any leftovers, so you're not wasting product, and time spent in prepping. So it's kind of like, do you want to do this? Most of the stuff I've gotten in has been good. Every now and then I got some product that some of the produce wasn't very good and I had to replace it. So it's a matter of how you deal with things and how you like it. There's nothing wrong. Well, I always tell people, like, I have tried Instant Pots. I really don't like them. I have tried air fryers. They're wonderful, but I don't need one. So if it works for you, keep doing it. It doesn't mean because I don't like it, it's not good. It doesn't mean because some other TV chef doesn't like it or they say, you should never do that. If it's working for you, keep doing it. If you like it, keep doing it.
So you travel a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, sometimes I follow, who was it, Anthony Bourdain, who recently passed, and he did a travel show with food, and I think Stanley Tucci does one now, strictly about Italy. I think it's sort of Italian food. Is that the type of thing you like to do when you travel?
When I travel, I like to immerse, and I like to find non-touristy places. We started traveling. That's how my wife and I kind of fell in love with each other. Our first trip was to Paris, and we were the country bumpkins. We were loaded with luggage, and I brought a suit. She brought a fur. We were going to be on the Champs-Élysées, and the lady, when we walked in the hotel, she goes, "Oh, le grand voyage," but and I also followed Rick Steves, and we were going to places we didn't want to go where all the tourists were. We wanted to eat with the locals. We wanted to hobnob with them and eat real food. So still today when we travel, we love our cruises. We love going. I work with Viking, and the food is just fabulous on board. But one thing nice about Viking is they generally park you in the middle of town. Like in the middle of, Vienna or
on the river,
someplace.
right on Danube. Right there.
In Budapest. So, you can walk off the ship and you can go find yourself a nice little restaurant and have lunch or have dinner with locals and eat. So we like to travel that way, and we like to enjoy it. Every now and then you end up in a tourist spot just because you're out of time or you just don't feel like walking. But, if you can find these out of the way places and you can get these meals, they're like, oh, God, look at this with all these fresh ingredients. They sent me to Ireland, and it was like, Dennis, we want you to help us dispel the myth the Irish don't know how to eat. And I'm like, oh, Lord, how do I do that? Because I was used to bad Irish food. Right. I got to Ireland and was completely blown away by how good the food was.
I mean, the European capitals in general have good food. There was a time, in England when I was first there, it was terrible. It was a shepherd pie or whatever it was, right? And now everybody has restaurants and there are chefs and people have learned to cook all throughout Europe. So at one point it was only France and Italy, I guess.
Yeah. Well, they've embraced, like in Ireland, what we learned was what we call farm to table as dinner there.
Right.
And a lot of Europe, it's the same way. The slow food movement really took hold there ages ago. They're very familiar with where they get product, where we're more interested about saving money on what we buy. They're more interested on where it came from. Is it quality product? And that's kind of how the mindset has changed. And that's because we consume mass quantities. When it comes to protein, it was like cover the plate in protein. Where in Europe, it's like, they have a good amount. It's 4 to 6 ounces of a really good protein, a steak or chicken or fish. Right. And the rest is vegetables and grains, and they eat a better quality meal than we tend to.
So let's switch gears right now. Tell me, if you've built a business around this. Tell me about the business.
Yeah. Well, I was a chef. I still am a chef. But I started the blog because my last job working in a commercial kitchen was at an all-girls high school. And I decided I needed to train my own staff since hiring temps was so bad. And I started doing that, and I wanted to start a blog so the girls had somewhere to go. Well, somewhere along the line, I started getting readers around the world, and I had these visions of becoming a business. I never imagined it would get to the level I'm at. And then I went on to Google+, and Google+ was really what elevated my presence.
Yeah, that doesn't exist anymore, does it?
No. And I have 1 million followers. I had another 1 million on Google+. So when they dissolved, so I was up to over 2 million at one point. But they had me on the follow page with Anthony Bourdain, Rachel Ray, Martha Stewart, Emer Lagasse, and here was Chef Dennis, with all the big guns. And it was mind-blowing that they thought of me in those terms because I was using the platform the way they intended it to be used.
Right.
So that's really what got me up and mobile in terms of creating the business. And then when I retired from the kitchen, I had more time to spend, and that's when I really started working on social media and working on my presence. But it becomes a business, and you have to learn about SEO, and you have to learn about all these different parts that drive your business.
So just sort of the last question, because we're going to have to sort of wrap it up for the radio audience at least.
Mm-hmm.
What is the revenue model here? So yes, on social media, you're building a big reputation. You are the chef, and the money is coming in how?
Yes, the money comes in through advertising, through ads on the blog. Okay, that is the major source of revenue. That is probably 75 to 80% of the revenue that I make. And the more traffic that comes to your blog, the more money you make. It's not just that though, but the better quality of recipe or pictures and the whole article that you write, they actually bid on being able to advertise on your page. And it's all through Google, it's through AdSense, but it's through their model of advertising. The company I work with is Mediavine, and they provide the ads for the blog, and they just direct deposit the checks.
And do you have sponsorship deals that you negotiate outside of the ad revenue?
Yes, people come to me all the time, and I decide who I want to work with. In the days before Mediavine was so strong, you had to take more work and possibly work with some people you weren't as comfortable with or the product. But now I can say, no, if I don't like your product, I'm not really working with you. Or I give them an exorbitant amount, and sometimes they say yes, and then I go, oh, crap, I got to work for this company now.
Okay, last question, and then we're out. How do I get 1 million followers? Can you get me 1 million followers?
Oh, it's not as difficult as you may think, but it's now because the internet is flooded with influencers. You have to have something you got to sell.
Right,
it's not as easy. So you have to be right time, right place, and you have to really spend some time working social media.
I will do. I'm going to take hints from you, mister. All right. Dennis, thank you so much. Dennis Littley, great chef. I'm so glad to have you on.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.